Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be going over the 10.1 tier list for every role, top 5, every role. So, thank you very much, as always, for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you do enjoy the content. It really does help out with viewership on the channel. And be sure to check out the rest of our content as well. We do new tier lists, champion guides. We stream every night starting around 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube. Usually go till about 2 or 3 a.m. We'd love to have you. It's a very friendly, chill community. I try to be as interactive as possible as I can be with the chat. We have some coaching sessions on the channel as well. So there's tons and tons of content. Be sure to check that out. And I'll also have timestamps in the description if you want to jump around to your favorite part. And some people have liked to go at the 1.5 speed to, make my videos go a bit faster. Because I know sometimes they are long. This is probably going to be 45 minutes to an hour. So don't forget you can always hit that cog and go to the 1.5 speed if you want to go a bit more. I just always like to put the depth in there for you instead of just giving you one of those like 15-minute, videos. It doesn't really tell you very much. Anyways, let's go ahead and get in here. So I do have a more in-depth support tier list video that's about an hour long by itself, so be sure to go check that out if you want to see the top 15 supports. But I'll just reiterate those just really quickly here, and then we'll move on to the other roles as well. So I think Soraka is probably going to be number 1 for most people right now. A lot of people have been sleeping on her all preseason. I was one of the first people, at least that I saw. I didn't see any other content creators talking about her. And there were several changes to her last season that kind of went under the radar. They increased the healing on her Q by a lot, and they nerfed the damage on both her Q and her E. So you couldn't do that battle Soraka that was really popular at one point in Season 8, I believe. But she started getting a lot more healing, and it also gave her a lot more movement speed personally whenever she hits a Q. But then they made it to where whenever she heals somebody else, they also get the movement speed. So that's something that a lot of people forget about with her, is that whenever you heal somebody, you're giving them like a pretty big boost in movement speed for 2 or 3 seconds. So that's certainly significant, especially when you're able to pop out those heals, every like 1.5 seconds. So that's really powerful with her. She also has a global ult, so whenever you press your R, you can influence all the lanes in the whole map. So that's really phenomenal, especially if you take Ulti Hunter, which is what I recommend with her. It just allows you to have a ton of pressure. It's kind of like why Karthus was really strong in the jungle for a lot of last years, because he could just keep power farming while at the same time influencing the map with his ult. Soraka is almost the exact same thing, right? You can just stay in lane and keep helping out your lane or keep applying pressure, but you can also heal anywhere on the map at any time to exert pressure in that way. And that also allows you to stack up some extra assists for some more gold early on, and it allows you to get those stacks on that Ulti Hunter so that you can start casting it more and more and more. So for a global ult that's that powerful, it's only on a 160-second cooldown when like Karthus starts off on like a 200-second cooldown. It's a really, really good bargain. So Soraka's not going to be, completely dominating and murdering everybody in lane most of the time. But in a lot of lanes, she will go even, and she just outscales so hard because the itemization on her is great. And just her baseline amount of healing and the amount of AP ratios and just how plus healing and shielding and the rune Revitalize works with her. Pretty much if they don't kill you immediately at the start of a mid-game fight, 15 minutes onward, you're going to win the fight. So that's what makes her particularly powerful. Now, what changed about her in the preseason? Well, a lot of it was the jungle slowed down a little bit. There are still early game junglers that are powerful, but they're not as oppressive as they were in Season 9. And she gets all that free gold early on because you don't have to buy the gold item, and she's the highest scaling support in the game. So getting that extra gold lead early is huge. Also, she didn't really care that they took off a lot of the stuff off of the early items. So she didn't care that you lost the mana regen. She didn't really care that you lost the on-hit. Because her spells are so easy to cast anyways. She has really low cooldowns, low cost harassment. So she's perfectly fine with supports in general being a little bit weaker in the early game, because once again, she's going to scale so hard. Now, they are giving mana regen back on this patch to some of those items, and they are taking away some of the AP later on. So we'll see. I still think that Relic Shield might be a good idea on her. However, it's possible that you should be going Frostfang instead and just going for an Athene's early. I'd have to remath that out. It probably depends on the matchup. If you're against like a Leona or a Nautilus, maybe you go Relic Shield for the extra survivability early on and for the guaranteed wards. But if it's maybe an easier matchup, if you're against like a Janna or something in lane, then maybe you can't afford to go for the Frostfang and the Athenes. But either way, she's going to be a powerhouse on this patch. Nautilus, obviously, everyone knows that Nautilus is good. Nautilus is not a secret. Nautilus had been good for a very long time last season, and a lot of people just did not recognize it until kind of very late into the season in the back half. Now, some of that is because in the pro scene, why you started seeing Nautilus as well, was because Braum and Tom got nerfed so hard. Now, they are still the most popular supports. If you look at the most recent Kespa Cup tournament, they were still the most popular sports. But Nautilus is still popular. He's still strong. And that's really what I think catalyzed him in the back half of last season, was people just saw pros playing him all the time. They're like, oh, well, he must be good. It's like, yeah, but he was pretty good for the entire time. So presence-wise, who was picked the most? Tom Kench was picked the most, although his play rate was 45%, and then Nautilus was the second most picked with a 50% win rate. So in pro, he's okay. But in solo queue, he is very strong. If you look at kind of the win rates here, Soraka is the second highest real support. I mean, Taric is a support, but he's picked so little. I guess he is 1.6, which is not like super abysmal low, but either way, it's a pretty low sample size there on the Taric. But he's still pretty good. He has been steadily dropping over the course of the season. Preseason, people are learning how to play against him a little bit more, rather. And some of the changes in the preseason did hurt him, like losing the regen off of Relic Shield, although he is gaining it back on this patch. And he's still going to be a powerhouse. He's still close to 52% overall. Has that point-click engage with his ultimate. You can't miss. It can knock up multiple people. It's on a low cooldown, 120 seconds, which is ridiculous for an ultimate like that. Pretty good AoE damage with his E spam. It also has really good wave clear. He's one of the only major tanks that actually has good wave clear. So, and you might be thinking, well, who cares about wave clear? If you're a support, you're not going to be last hitting anyways. True, but you can prep the minions for your ally. So you can use your E to damage a lot of the minions, set them up, and then someone like a Caitlyn can just Q right through them, or a Jhin can grenade right through them. So it really helps your allies out a lot if you're trying to push to go roam for a dragon or a scuttle or an invade or whatever, if you can push a little bit. And there might be some times where, you know, just other people aren't around, they're just goofing around and no one's catching a wave, and you just have to clear a wave out. So you never know. It could be really good. His one major downside is that his defensive steroid is kind of weak compared to someone like Leona's defensive steroid and a couple of the other tanks out there, in that his W is typically what you can either max it second or last. A lot of times I max it second, but it's still not a huge shield that you get on him. And he doesn't have the flat armor. I think he's got like 36 base armor, whereas someone like a Leona and Alistar, Braum, Tom, a lot of those champs are going to have like 44 armor base. So his baseline stats are going to be a bit lower, but he definitely makes up for it. The fact that he has such reliability with the ult, his auto attacks actually root people for 0.75, and his hook is so easy to hit. It's got a really fat hitbox. It's a really fast animation, so it's right up there with Blitz in terms of most effective and powerful hooks. Now, it can't go through walls. That's kind of the one drawback, is you can't catch people out of position, especially in that upper river bush that's near mid lane. The fact that you can't hook over those walls can be kind of bad in some situations, but overall, he's still going to be a real powerhouse pick. And he's unique because of his ult, just how powerful, how high impact it is, and his wave clear. He can also use his hook to escape, so you can't go through walls, but if you're in kind of a sticky situation, like you're getting ganked, then you can Q and like Q to a tower or Q to some like a wall or something like that and get out of it. So he is going to be really strong. So Rakan is the next one that I'm going to mention here. Now, this is something where most people, I mean, everybody's going to have Nautilus. If they're trolling if they don't have Nautilus in their top 5 tier list. So many channels are doing tier lists right now, obviously, because it's a new season. Soraka, a lot of people are waking up to Soraka, but so many people are still sleeping on Rakan. And it's just amazing just how many people sleep on this champion. Let me see here. Let me show you something real quick. So if we look at another site here, League of Graphs, if we look at champions, trying to remember, I found this stat the other day. I was looking for historical data, all durations, all roles. I don't know if I can find it again, I'll have to think about it. But I looked it up, and Rakan historically was the most popular and highest win rate stat of all, or champ of all time. I think this is going to be it. It might have been on Games of LoL. Yeah. Hold on, here we go. If we go season all, here we go. It's right on Games of LoL. Here you go. Historically, since they started tracking, which I guess was in season 4 on Games of League, this is in pro play. But if you look at highest presence here, Rakan's going to be really high up there, but he's a 54% overall win rate. Now, pro is not the same as solo queue, obviously, but I think a lot of people really discount Rakan. Sometimes people ask me, why are you playing Rakan? Why are you playing Rakan? It's like, well, he's the highest win rate champion of all time since they started tracking in Season 4. That has at least a 25% presence. You can find higher win rates down here eventually, but you gotta scroll. Like, okay, Gangplank also has 54%, but he only has 23% presence. So once you start getting down into the lower presences, you know, Nidalee's there, things that are picked and banned, then you start finding it. But for someone who's that popular to have a 54% is crazy. Braum is actually the most picked support of all time, and Ryze is the most picked champion of all time. So, just some kind of cool stats there. But, like, what makes Rakan so good, and why do people underestimate him right now? Which sounds crazy to underestimate him, but he is underestimated. He does not have a very high presence. If we look here at Rakan, he's only picked 4.8% of the time. He's so versatile. That's the thing that I always tell people on stream, and why I play him so much, is that he can adapt to so many different game states if you're aware of everything that he's capable of, right? Because he has 2 different dashes off of his E, he has an additional dash off of his W, and he has his R, which gives him a lot of extra movement speed. So with all of that mobility, you can just respond to so many different situations. You can go in with your W, then go out with your E, or you can E to catch up to somebody, and then W, and then go back out with your E again. So he can engage and peel in the same sequence, in the same combo. So you can, you know, W in, knock up their 80 carry, you know, someone comes out of a bush or something, starts going after your 80 carry, you can, you know, zip back right back over to your 80 carry with an E and turn it around. He also has really good itemization because he's a great hybrid of a tank plus an enchanter. So he can get things like a Zeke's if he wants to early on, but then he can also get Ardent Censer, he can get Redemption, Shirelia's. So he can unlock all of those enchanter support items, and it gives him so much scaling because his shield is so strong. Both of those shields combined is a 280 base shield with a 1.6 AP ratio that ends up being on like an 8-second cooldown without CDR, which is crazy. I mean, Janna's shield is 220 with a 12-second cooldown that can get reduced a little bit if you hit CC, but either way, y'all see what I'm saying, right? And that he gets like 2 free dashes and a bigger shield and like twice the scaling. It's pretty crazy. So that's why Rakan is so good, is that he can just adapt. If your ADC's feeding, which is something you need to adapt to a lot, no problem. You can just go Moby Boots, roam around. If one of your meatballs gets ahead, like a Darius or a Mordekaiser or something like that, you can get a Shirelia's early on to help them out. If you have a team fighter on your team that's doing really well, like a Rumble or a Kennen or a Vlad, something like that, you can go Redemption and try to force more team fights. If your AD carry is actually doing super well, you can actually go Zeke's into Ardent Censer, and that's going to give them the double on-hit buff. So they're going to get the on-hit from the Zeke's, and they're going to get the on-hit from the Ardent Censer, as well as the extra attack speed. So he's just so versatile in that he can do so many different things. I think that always makes him relevant. I think anyone that doesn't have Rakan in top 5 of a tier list almost ever is trolling. Unless they do something dramatically to nerf his W again, or like to nerf his ult, I think he's just always going to be good. So he's not for everybody. You know, for me, I think he's going to be my number 1 support starting off on the season. But I realize that not a lot of people have a ton of practice on him. And it's not that his mechanics are really hard. It's just that there are so many possibilities with him. Sometimes the decisions can be hard because he does have so much freedom. He does have so much flexibility. So just figuring out which items you should be getting and like how you should be approaching the game, who you should be playing around, what you should be doing, can be difficult for a lot of people. One final thing that I'll say about him is that he has such awesome vision control, and a lot of people really underestimate this or don't utilize this even to its maximum capacity. But if you get those Moby Boots, you can, if you get priority in your lane, you can afford to go in and get those deep wards in the enemy jungle. You know, ward up their golems, ward up their red, ward up their wraiths. And you can get out safely most of the time because even if the jungler spots you, you have your W. You can just run away, jump over a wall, and that's it. Against most junglers. Obviously, if it's like a 7-0 Vi or something like that, they can just press R on you. You got to proceed with a bit more caution. But in general, you're going to be able to get away from most junglers. So that's going to allow you to get deeper vision and just take a bit more risk. So anyways, I think he's going to be amazing. Definitely consider checking him out, especially if you're like maybe gold or platinum plus. But I still think he can win in the lower brackets, but sometimes the decision making can be a bit trickier down there because you're already having to think about so many other things that sometimes you can forget some stuff with Rakan. Okay, Zyra, I think is still going to be really good, especially if you're gold and lower. Does a ton of damage, has some great pokes. She is getting the mana regen on the Frostfang back on this patch, so that's really good for her. A big drawback, though, is that her items are very expensive. So the fact that you typically will want to be getting Sorcerer Boots into that component to Morellonomicon, I'm blanking out on the name, Oblivion Orb, there we go. You want to get Oblivion Orb, and then you have to either finish off Morellonomicon or get Leandries, depending on what the situation is. So they did change her on this patch. They gave her slow plants a double tap so that you can apply additional slow. I'll have to play and see how it goes. I don't think you want to use melee plants most of the time because it will slow a single target, but you're going to lose out on a lot of damage in team fight, so that could be problematic. But maybe you do. Maybe against single target, you could put that in there, and that'll get him to stay. I don't know. I don't think it's going to be a huge deal, but either way, she is very impressive in lane. She has a lot of poke. She has great wave clear. She has excellent team fighting. The problem is she lacks mobility, so if they have assassins on their team, you can get blasted in the mid game, and her items are very expensive. So if you fall behind, if you're not getting the plates and the towers, you will get outscaled eventually. But if you do have someone on your team, an AD carry that's really aggressive and wanting to get some kills with you, like a Draven, a Jhin, a Misfortune, something like that, then she can be very strong. One final knock on her is that her E is on a very long cooldown. It's a slow-moving projectile, and it has a very slender hitbox. So if you miss that E, you are extremely vulnerable for a lot of the game. So you really have to have some good bush work. You have to, gain control of the bushes, and you have to be kind of sneaky and get into these bushes where people aren't going to be expecting you, and then you can blow them up out of the bush. So she is one of the best bushmasters in the game, because she can one-shot as a support. She's one of the few supports that can actually one-shot you off of very few items out of a bush by herself. So all you need are the Sork Boots and that Oblivion Orb, and you're probably going to be able to kill most squishies for the first half of the game out of a bush. So very good. She also does have excellent vision control as well. So you can summon your plants in a bush, and it will actually see like an entire ward's length worth of radius, even if they have a control ward. So you can put a plant in like the tri-bush, for example, where people often fight around those control wards in the bot lane, and you can safely clear the bush because the plant's going to be looking out for you, as well as applying some pressure. If people try to step up, they're going to take some damage off of that plant. And her plant can block hooks. So if you are against Blitzcrank or Nautilus or whatever, and you're quick enough with summoning the plants, you can summon those plants to block a hook for yourself or for your ally. So it's a little bit more advanced, but you can do that also. And then the final one that I'll mention here is really quickly is Leona. Nautilus is getting banned out a lot, so if you like that type of champion, then you can play Leona. She's banned a lot less. And if you think about when both Leona and Nautilus are banned in the same game, that's fairly rare. It does happen, but she's a good backup person to have if you like the hard engage. Couple of perks of Leona are that she can engage through minions. She has a very slender hitbox on her E, but you don't have to position yourself around the wave to hit people, so that's nice. And her ult is pretty long range, and it's on a very low cooldown. It's only 90 seconds to engage. So she has excellent all-in engage early on. It does a ton of damage, and excellent on roams because her ult's on such a low cooldown. The big downside of her is she has to go all the way in. She goes 100% over to the other person. So that can be very difficult in terms of positioning in the wave because you just may not have enough room to get on them safely before they get back to their tower. And she has a hard time escaping. At least Nautilus has a hook that you can hit towers or walls to get away, and he doesn't have to go in as far whenever he hooks. Leona has to stay in. Whenever she goes in, she's all in. So it can be very risky if you're getting camped, or if the enemy might be able to turn it around on you. That can be tough. And she has if the Thresh is good, she has a fairly tough matchup against Thresh because he can flay back your E pretty easily, and that's going to put you in a very vulnerable position. It's a tough matchup against Thresh, who's the most popular support, but overall, she can still be pretty good. Okay, so that's enough for support. Let's get to the other roles here. Miss Fortune, I think, is going to be the number 1 AD carry. I'm not sure if she's drawn a lot of bans yet or not, but this champion is super powerful right now. She was actually the most played AD carry at the Kespa Cup by a long shot. So if you look at Kespa 2019 here, all things, pick banned in 98% of games with a 67% run rate. That is scorching. And that kind of came out of nowhere. Like, I've always known Miss Fortune's good at, like, gold and lower. You know, that ultimate's just so strong for team fighting. But she's just kind of, it seems like she's vulnerable, right? Like, she doesn't have a dash or a flash, and it just seems like you would be able to get on her and potentially kill her. But that is not the case. She's been making a huge splash in solo queue and in pro play. She's still not getting any bans. It's a 2.8% ban rate right now. Everybody's banning Aphelios. If you're going to ban an AD carry, you're going to ban Aphelios. Some people are still banning Senna, but nobody bans Miss Fortune. So she's kind of like the perfect champion to play right now if you're an AD carry and you're trying to gain a lot. So what's up with her? Why is she good? Well, first of all, like I just mentioned, her ultimate does an obscene amount of damage. I'll actually pull her up here real quickly to show you, because she is the number 1, who I'm saying should be the number 1 pick. And I think overall it's difficult to argue that. I mean, if they're playing her at the pro level, that means she's OP. Like a champion like that who's that kind of straightforward, if she's being played at pro, then she's going to be way too strong. But her ultimate just does an insane amount of damage. I think it's 900 damage at level 6 if they sit in the whole thing. Now, obviously, they're not going to sit in the whole thing mostly. But even if they sit in a little bit of that, it's still just nuts. Look at that, 900 damage. Or 900% of your total AD. Let me put it that way. So if you have like 150 AD, then that would be like, I don't know, 1400 damage, 1450. It's just a crazy amount of damage. 1350. Math's hard sometimes. But it's just a crazy amount of damage that she gets. AoE, hits a ton of people, it's on a low cooldown, actually has a lot of range. 1400 range is huge. And each one of these things can crit. Each wave can crit. Now, it's only 20% extra damage every time that it crits, with a 25% off of Infinity Edge. So it's not like a full-on 100% extra per wave. But it's a lot. It's a lot of damage. So that's number 1, is that she's excellent at team fights. A lot of the meta right now revolves around major team fights around key dragons or towers or Baron or Rift. There are just so many neutrals that can inspire people to team fight right now. So that's really good. Make It Rain is just really nice for setting up a lot of skill shots, particularly with a lot of these supports like your Nautiluses, your Leonas, your Zyras, even Rakan. Like, they have really brutal engages. And so Make It Rain allows you to hit those engages a lot better. So if you just Make It Rain on their support that doesn't have any, like, mobility skills like a Soraka or something, and you have a Nautilus sitting right there, the Nautilus is going to hit that hook almost 100% unless the Soraka flashes. So it just really sets it up very well for your teammates to hit skill shots. And even casting Make It Rain and then bullet time makes it really hard for people to run out of your bullet time. And this is very long range as well, 100, or 1,000 rather. So this is 1,000 range, this is 1,400 range. So it's very, very long range. And then the strut is something that a lot of people have figured out over the last year is just really, really good. Not only does it apply all that movement speed, but it's so much attack speed. It's up to 100% attack speed. So that's actually quite a huge steroid. In the past, people have thought about Miss Fortune as just kind of like, almost like a mage, where you just pretty much, your bullet time is most of your damage. Maybe you get a double up or two, and that's some damage. But just like her basic auto attacks now can do quite a bit too with this. And there have been some different builds. Last year, people were doing a Blade the Ruined King into, I think, Ghostblade type of build to really maximize on her movement and her auto attacks. People have moved away from that now with some of the buffs to Critical Strike over the last season or so. And now people are doing Essence Reaver into Infinity Edge as the primary selection. And then I think it kind of depends after that. There's some different options. You could either go Storm Razor or you could go Rapid Fire Cannon. But those are kind of the first two items that you want. And a lot of the top-end champs are rushing two big crit items, whether it's Storm Razor Infinity Edge or whether it's Essence Reaver Infinity Edge. And that's just where you want to be right now. You just want that flat AD. You want your abilities to just hit like a truck because the mid-game matters so much. You're not going to have time to stack up 3 items. I mean, you might in a lot of games, but you're going to lose a lot of tempo doing that. Just the flat AD and the crit, especially if you have abilities that interact with crit really well, are going to be where you want to be. So that's going to allow you to apply a lot more pressure as an AD carry. Because one of the big drawbacks of AD carry historically is that they take a lot of items to come online, right? Like mages come online with 1 or 2 items. Most other roles come online with 1 or 2 items. But historically, it's taken 3 items for AD carries to come online and be very effective. But now with that build, with the Essence Reaver plus Infinity Edge or Storm Razor plus Infinity Edge, you can come online with 2 items and be very, very strong. And even with 1 item, you can be pretty good. So Essence Reaver is very popular on her because you have such a high impact ult that you want that up as much as possible. It should almost always be a kill whenever you have that ult up. So that just makes it really strong. Great steroid there, great movement speed. This means that you don't have to get boots early too. So she's one of the few AD carries that can still get the boot rune. She can go boots biscuits as her secondary and not miss out on rotations that much in the early game. So that's really powerful with her. And then of course her harassment is very cheap. It's only, 50 mana in the early levels, and it just hits like a truck, especially if you get that free crit and you have a lot of flat AD. You're starting off with those BF swords on your 2 first couple of items, in addition to love tap doing extra damage. It just hits really, really hard. And this is long range, once again, because you can cast this from 650 range, and it can bounce another 500 range. So all of her abilities just allow you to play so far back off the wave where people can't harass you back, but you can still actively put down a lot of harassment on them. And with Make It Rain, and when you activate Strut, she gets the full movement speed for 5 seconds, even while she's taking damage. So it does allow her to move around a little bit. So she's not the most mobile champion in the world as far as like dashing in the middle of fights, but she does have rotations, and she also has some mobility where she can reposition in fights. And she can just channel this from so far back as well. So that'll keep you out of Rumble range, Cannon range, Vlad range, all this other AoE stuff that's going on right now. She can usually hang out really far in the back and still make a very meaningful impact. So I think Miss Fortune's going to be the best overall right now. Aphelios is still going to be super strong, and he's becoming even more dangerous as people are learning how to play him more. So he did get some nerfs on this patch. He did get a hot patch nerf as well. Last patch, or maybe it wasn't a hot nerf, but it was a nerf last patch. They've nerfed his flamethrower twice. They nerfed it here, and I think they nerfed, I don't remember what they nerfed about it before, but he's had 3 or 4 nerfs. But the thing is, people are getting way better at playing him also, so I think that offsets the fact that there are the nerfs, that people just understand what they're doing. And he just has so much utility to him. He has the long range from his sniper rifle. He has the free healing in the laning phase, which is massive. Off of that, I don't remember what all the guns are called, but the healing gun, and then he has the Gravitum gun, where he gets that root on people, which is a great setup for your engaged supports, your Leonas, your Nautiluses, all that stuff. Just crazy range. The Sentry is pretty good at zoning. So he just has a ton of tools in his toolkit that you can use once you learn how to play him correctly. I feel like his laning phase is not that great. It's okay. But then once he gets 1 or 2 items, he just does an insane amount of damage overall. So I think he's still going to be really, really good. So he might fall down, I don't know, 0.5% or something on this patch, maybe. But I still think he's going to be really far up there. He's still 53%, 52.5% right now. So very, very scary champion. So I would highly recommend picking up Aphelios if you haven't already. Jhin is another one who's really strong, and I've been saying that Jhin has been strong the entire preseason, and a lot of people haven't really bought into it. But that new Storm Razor is so huge on him. Slowing someone else down and being able to speed Jhin up at the same time is massive. And the crit cloak stacking. He's one of the best crit cloak stackers out there. You don't have to do that every game, but that was something I recommended from day one. And a month and a half later, people started picking it up. But he benefits the most from anybody from Critical Strike because it not only gives him a ton of extra damage, but it also gives him move speed. So if he gets to 100% crit, he's just always going to be running around like he has Ghost activated, which is obviously amazing for running people down or kiting. So I think that you could go Infinity Edge and just grab 3 crit cloaks if you wanted to, or you could go like Storm Razor, Infinity Edge, and then 2 crit cloaks. So I'm not 100% sure like in which situations you would want to do what, but either way, Critical Strike got a huge buff in the preseason, if you didn't know, because they gave it an extra 5% crit on the crit cloak for free. That's like a 200 gold value in the past. So the crit cloak as an item got like 25% more efficient. So it's just crazy. In addition to Storm Razor itself getting some good buffs, and that's why all of these crit users, the people that are getting the big AD plus crit, are becoming so strong right now, as people are figuring that out and they're playing those champs really well. So Jhin's great, excellent harassment early on, pushes really well with grenades, allows you to get priority, go contest scuttles, go help your support get some deep wards, hits like a truck. His W actually has a pretty good snare to it. So if you tag somebody and then hit them with the W, that sets up really well for your support to go in and engage. And then he has that long range ult, which can help, just snipe people down that are trying to run away, or can even set up if you have a gank coming in but you're too far away, like you're trying to clear a wave under tower or near tower, and the enemy starts running away pretty quickly. You can still use your ult to help your support and the jungler run down and kill some people. So it's got a lot of utility with him. Great chain CC, excellent scaling, especially against squishy targets when he stacks all of that crit. So I think that Jhin is still going to be really strong right now. Senna's another one who has been nerfed several times, but I still think she's going to be solid. She just has so much utility in her kit, really long range, obviously, but then the W for the potential multi-target, multi-target route for about a second and a half. They did nerf that a little bit at lower levels, but I think you max that second anyway, so it's pretty good. Ironically, her E is the thing that I think is one of the least OP things about her, and that's what everyone thought was going to be really OP. The smoke that gives you the movement speed and shrouds your allies. But that is really good in team fights, because people just don't know when you come rolling up with that smoke who's coming out of it, who they should target. So depending on, different champion interactions, that can be very, very strong with her. So she doesn't have the highest sustained damage out there as far as like taking Barons, taking Dragons, just sitting there trying to crack through a tank. It's not really going to be that much damage, so you have to have other people with you. But, her single target burst can get to be pretty good once you complete Manamune plus Dustblade. She can hit people reasonably hard, and she does get that extra movement speed on every auto, and of course she gets the free crit as well whenever she stacks that up. So I think she's going to be really solid. You just got to make sure that you have some damage on the rest of your team too, to make up for the fact that you're not going to have the largest damage in the world, probably. You can still do pretty good damage, but it's just her really slow attack speed and all the other modifiers that get applied to her mean that I don't think, if you're just sitting there like trying to see who can throw out the most damage in team fights, she's not going to be one of them, right? She also doesn't take Hurricane. She doesn't have a lot of AoE stuff. She has her Q as an ability. She has her ult. But it's not going to be as much as Misfortune or Twitch, who's casting his ult, or Jinx with her rockets. Like, there's going to be a lot of other champions, or Aphelios with his Infernum is still probably going to blow everybody up in one shot. So she's just really good lane pressure champion that brings a lot of utility to your team over time. So I think that's really nice. And then Caitlyn's the last one. Now, Caitlyn could be up even a little bit higher if it's a good Caitlyn, but I swear, even in low diamond, the Caitlyn's just cannot play this champion. I don't know why it's so difficult to play her, but it is, for some reason. You just got to make sure you're laying down those traps. As soon as people step on those traps, you got to get that headshot combo on them. You auto-attack E. As you're netting backwards, you buffer a Q. That hits them with the Q, and then as soon as you land again, then you get one more headshot, and that'll probably almost kill somebody in one rotation, if you get it that way. But I see so many times where someone will step on a trap. If the Caitlyn even sets down traps at all, they'll step on the trap, and then Caitlyn will just headshot them, and that's it. At a minimum, you need to be throwing your Q at them and headshotting them, if you're in range, obviously. But I still don't even see people doing that. Because if someone steps on your trap and you throw your Q, it does 100% damage to the person that's trapped, even if it goes through a bunch of minions. So it does a lot more damage than you would think, because usually the Q gets reduced by the amount of targets that it hits. But it's different with headshots. So just a lot of these little things that a lot of people don't know about Caitlyn and don't respect. And she is a bit stronger now because she can go 2 big AD items. She can go Storm Razor, Infinity Edge, and then double crit cloak if she wants to. So she doesn't have, or you can get rapid fire cannon as your third. So her mid game is not as bad as it used to be. It used to be terrible outside of the laning phase, but now it's not as bad. And what made it bad historically is she has really poor attack speed scaling. She has like a 0.56 base attack speed, which is super slow compared to a lot of other AD carries out there. And she doesn't have any attack speed steroids in her kit, so nothing gives her extra attack speed. It's just a lot of it comes down to how well do you use those traps. How well do you use your net to keep yourself safe. And a lot of people just play her like she's basically a Jinx or something, right? Where you're just standing max range and you're just, last hitting during the laning phase. And that's a fail because most other people are going to outscale you unless you, have really skilled Caitlyn play in team fights, which a lot of people don't. So, anyways, I think she has the potential to be really strong, but in reality, it just doesn't happen that way a lot of times. I just think that if you want someone who's kind of longer range like that brings more utility, I think Senna is probably just going to be better a lot of times. Okay. Mid lane. All right, so I think Diana is definitely the strongest mid laner right now. The mid lane is always one of the hardest ones to do a tier list for because you have so many of these little like weird champions that have high win rates with like less than a 3% pick rate. You've got like Aurelion Sol, you've got up there. You've got things like Zillion's up there. Even Rumble was like pretty popular in the last pro scene here. At least in the early rounds. He kind of fell off a bit later and people stopped playing him. But he had a 54% win rate in the tournament with 48% presence. That's not that bad. And I've seen him more and more, and he definitely can be really strong, but still, he's only like a 2% play rate. Vel'Koz, 2% play rate. Nocturne, 2% play rate. So there's just a lot of diversity going on in mid lane right now. So a lot of stuff can work. I do think, however, that Diana is over the top. They did nerf the Ardent Sensor build on her, so you have to shield or heal somebody else to activate the Ardent Sensor. So she's not going to be able to do that, but honestly, it really doesn't matter. Like, that was just kind of the cherry on top for Dianas that watch the all caps videos. She's still going to be super strong right now, and the thing is, she just has like a really strong amount of survivability between her shield and her mobility. She just, I don't know, like she has really high sustain damage because she gets so much attack speed. So like in longer fights, when you're activating your Moonsliver Blade, and if you get something like a Nashor's Tooth, which I think the most common build on her is probably going to be Rod of the Ages and the Nashors. And she can do really high bursts, but then she can also just stick in combat and just keep auto-attacking people and is doing a ton of damage. And because she has that rod and because she gets the shield off of her Pale Cascade, then... And it's actually a pretty good shield. It has scaling with AP and her bonus health. So it ends up being a pretty big shield. That she's just so hard to kill. And in team fights with her ultimate that draws people in and just does a huge hit of damage on them. It's on a very low cooldown, 100 seconds at early levels. She just does too much. She's just like too tanky, too much burst damage, too much sustained damage. So I think she's really good. I mean, you can play around her, but it's still going to be very difficult to kite her, especially once she starts getting more CDR. And she just scales up really high. So she's like an assassin that has more survivability and does really good sustained damage as well. So I think she's just a little too strong right now. Qiyana's another one. Now, Qiyana might raise a couple of eyebrows because she doesn't have the highest win rate overall. But she was still very good at kind of higher elo, and I know this is not like the highest, this is intended for kind of mid elo people, not high elo people. People that are like gold, silver, platinum, in that range. But still, I mean, you can't argue with that. It's 80% win rate, like 79% with 57% presence. And I'm telling you, I've seen like really good Qiyana still in mid lane, in solo queue. She is very, very difficult to deal with because she can get Moby boots and roam really well. And she just has so much utility. She has a root off. I don't remember exactly how all of her elementals work, but I know that she has a root. I think it's off of her water elemental that she can get. Her ultimate's really high impact, can definitely burst people out, can hit multiple targets in team fights. So she does have some team fight presence. And yeah, it's just she just does a lot of damage. Does a hell of a lot of damage and has a lot of mobility and has some utility with her ultimate, with her grass. It makes it really hard to gank her if she has that active where she goes invisible. So there are definitely a lot of bad Qiyanas out there, but there are very good ones too. I feel like her wave clear is pretty good too. I'm not 100% about that, but I think that her wave clear is stronger than a lot of other popular assassins out there. If you're thinking of like Kassadin, Katarina, things like that. Ekko has pretty good wave clear too. But I feel like hers is definitely on the strong side. But I think they nerfed that about her. That was one of the major things they nerfed about her. They nerfed her base damage there. I think they made it to where people could play around her W more. Yeah, this Audacity thing. They increased the cooldown on that. So they did a couple of things there, but, you know, obviously I'm not a Qiyana expert. But I feel like she has really good wave clear, that she can get priority, and that she's one of the few assassins that will get mobility boots and be able to rotate around the map and make plays. So I think she's going to be really good. Ekko's another champion that's really strong. You'll also see him on the jungle tier list, so he might be one of the strongest overall champs just because he can be flexed to 2 different roles. But he's just so good right now after the buffs on him. He just has a ton of movement speed off of his passive. You can hit multiple targets too. It's an on-target cooldown, not a total cooldown. So in a team fight, you know, if your passive's up for a couple of seconds, then you trigger it on somebody else, you get a refresh of that movement speed. So he just runs really quickly. He has really high AP ratios on his abilities. So yeah, here he gets, you know, in the mid game, 60% movement speed, non-decaying. It stays up the entire time for 2.5 seconds. And on top of that, he basically gets 2 dashes. So he can dash once for 325, and then he can auto attack for another 450. So he can dash like 800 range in addition to having all this extra free movement speed. So he's so sticky. And then this thing just does an absurd amount of damage, has a 0.9 ratio on it, and does 260 base damage on his Time Winder, AoE, on a fairly short cooldown. And then his Parallel Convergence was something they nerfed, or they buffed rather, a while back, to where it's now a 2.25 second stun if he lands it. So he's not always going to land that, but if he does, it's basically lights out, especially if he hits multiple targets in a team fight, and just casually shields himself with a 150% ratio. What? And then, of course, you have his Chrono Break, which pretty much gives him 2 health bars. It's what it feels like. He just gains almost his whole health bar back whenever he Chrono Breaks. And it's on a 110-second cooldown. And it does quite a lot of damage if he hits somebody with it. So that makes him really good against other assassins. So he himself is very mobile and plays like an assassin. But he has a lot of that free survivability built into his kit through the shield on Parallel Convergence and through his ult, being able to heal himself for a ton. So it's kind of like that's a common theme with Diana, getting a lot of extra survivability through her itemization and her shield, also being an assassin. Same thing with Ekko, highly mobile, assassin-like champion that just gets a bunch of free survivability. So I just think he does too much, has too much scaling. His items are also really cheap. He gets like Proto Belt, Zanya's, and he still has enough damage to kill you, even with 2 utility items early on. So I just think he's going to be really good. He doesn't get seen in Pro that much. I guess he has some bad matchups. I don't know like 100% what's up with that, but in solo queue, he's certainly going to be an extremely strong champion who can be flexed in multiple roles. Kassadin's another one. Everyone knows about Kassadin. They did nerf 5 movement speed on him early. I mean, it's something, I guess, but that's not the problem. Like, the problem is the game just slowed down a little bit early on because junglers can't apply as much pressure. And he still just gets a free laning phase because he can take Fleet Footwork and then Bloodline and Taste of Blood and Ravenous Hunter. And he's just going to be able to heal through almost everything. He naturally has resistance to magic damage. He gets like 15% reduction from all magic damage, and he has a magic shield every time he presses his Q. I think, didn't they buff him for some reason in the preseason? I feel like they buffed him. They gave like his Q a shorter cooldown or something a patch or 2 ago. So they should just never buff this champion. This champion is so difficult to balance. He always has been. He's just too consistent, and he's too tanky for how much damage and how much mobility he puts out. Yeah, so they buffed his Q back on 924. okay, they reduced his mana, like, that he gets back on Netherblade. Whatever. Like, they could just completely remove the mana, and it wouldn't matter. It's not, because he goes double mana items. He goes Rod of the Ages plus Seraphs. He's going to have, like, a mana pool of, like, 3,000 mana. I mean, I guess, like, a little bit, it's nice. Like, it does matter, you know, when you're trying to get, like, one last jump off in the mid to late game. But he's just has so much, like, an embarrassment of riches to begin with. Extra damage there in the back half of the season. But yeah, he's just the same formula. Lots of mobility, lots of free survivability with his kit. Excellent against mages. Once he completes Rod of the Ages and gets his Seraphs completed, it's just almost impossible to stop him. Because he can just zip around and just clean up all these Clown Fiesta fights going on. So he doesn't have a lot of wave clear. He can get bullied. He can get pressured early. But if people don't close out the game, if he just gets a couple of items, just takes one fight where he gets a few cleanup kills, then it's kind of off to the races. He just has so much base health, too. It's like, why does he have that much health? I mean, I know he's melee. I guess his armor's really low. So they're trying to make him weak to things like Talon, like Zed. But a lot of those champs aren't doing so hot right now. Zed's alright. Zed's at 50%. I think Talon was, Talon's around there too. I don't remember. Oh, there he is. Yeah, Talon's at like 51%. But those champs aren't really that popular. You do have AD, some AD options with Qiyana in the mid lane, but they're just, most mid laners right now are going to be AP mages. And he's just super good at that. So yeah, he's going to be a great champ. And then Katarina's the last one that I'll put in here. I've seen several really strong cats lately. Obviously, she's gonna, she's on the difficult side to play. You have to know all her combos, get all of her resets, position correctly, not be too bloodthirsty. But she just puts out so much burst damage. It's ridiculous, especially once Conqueror gets set up and she gets Gunblade, just the healing and the Triumph stacks. The healing that she gets off of that just allows her to get more and more resets and just totally clean up fights. So she is one of the quintessential, 1v9 champions in League, and the Conqueror being able to stack up so fast with her because she can cast spells so quickly, giving her the healing and the ton of extra adaptive damage is just super good. So especially if the enemy team doesn't have a lot of CC, and if you're against someone that isn't playing something that's like really oppressive in the early game, or they're just giving you a free laning phase, she's super, super good. So I think that Cat's amazing right now. There are a few other ones mid lane that I think are worth mentioning just because mid's so diverse. Malzahar's still really strong. Like, a lot of people don't play him that much, I guess, because he's pretty simple. But he has great wave clear, and just that lockdown ultimate just means you're always relevant, even if you fall behind. So if you're auto-filled and you want to play it out and not dodge, I highly recommend trying out Malzahar. He's just and he's got solid itemization too, just being able to go for the double pen items, getting a Morellonomicon to help your team out in terms of the healing reduction with all the Sorakas, Zax, Mundos, Katarinas, all that stuff running around, can be really good. So I do think that Malzahar deserves a little bit of a mention. I still think Talia can be really good as well as far as a push and roam type of champ. You don't see her a ton. But I think that she has some potential. And then Ahri's almost always going to be really good. 3 different dashes, good roam potential, good wave clear. I mentioned Rumble. Rumble specifically against someone like Akali is really good because his flamethrower and his harpoons can damage people even in the smoke. Fizz, a lot of people would have Fizz up at tier 1. I do think that he is really good. He is very one-dimensional. You have to land your shark. You have to go on people, but he's hard to target. He's hard to lock down. If he does get really far ahead, he can definitely get a lot of kills. I just think that some of these other ones are going to be a little bit stronger than him, but he is still going to be really, really good. That said, for mid lane, you could easily have a much, much bigger tier list of 10 champions that are really good. Cassio's very good, especially if they have a lot of tanks right now. Vlad's still going to be very good, particularly, in a team fight comp. TF, if you want to be able to roam side lanes really well, can be pretty solid. So there's a lot of good stuff. I even saw some Lissandras doing really well, and Oriana's over the last couple of days. So mid is probably the most diverse role out there. So these are just the 5 that I have there. But, if you're really good on a champ that's, even remotely viable right now in mid lane, then you'll probably do pretty well. I think it's a very balanced patch for mid laners. Okay, Ekko, we talked about him. Very strong. He doesn't threaten dragons really early, which is probably one of the biggest knocks on him. I don't know how he lines up against early game aggression like Lee Sin and Elise. I think he probably gets bodied. And that might be why he doesn't show up in Pro as much. But if they let you just farm it out a little bit, you know, he can be very strong. And he uses Runic Echo super well. And then he can just kind of get his standard items after that. The Proto Belt, the Zanyas, all of that. So he does bring a lot to the table as a jungler as well. Master Yi, obviously, everyone knows Master Yi, especially at gold and lower. This guy's just a total menace. Because the meta slowed down a little bit, where he just gets to like power farm a bit more. People can't pressure as much in the early game. That's going to be perfect for Master Yi. He does take dragons quickly, barons quickly, towers. He has the option to split push. He can team fight and clean up fights. So as long as you're good at like playing around the enemy CC as Master Yi, if you're just kind of chilling, waiting on other people to blow their CC and then you go in, or if you're smart enough to take a quick silver sash, or if you can alpha strike some of their skill shots, then he's going to be unstoppable. If people are just sitting there trying to right-click him, then he's going to win. So he's just a super, super strong champion. Very, very abusable, especially in ELOs where people don't communicate well. Sometimes they may not even draft CC at all, and if they do, they might just blow all their CC on the Leona who just engaged instead of saving it for the Master Yi. So I think he just really capitalizes on people making poor decisions with their cooldowns. So yeah, Yi's going to be very strong. Elise is another one that's been coming up a lot, and she is going to be stronger at like Platinum Plus where people can fully utilize her kit. But I still think she can be good even at lower elo brackets. She's like the best pressure jungler, I think. I don't remember how she did in the last tournament. Very well, 64%. So yeah, Lee was picked more, but he only had a 45% win rate. But I think that she just really is like the best early pressure jungler right now for a few different reasons. Number one, she does take dragons super quick with her Spiderling, so she can do probably like a level 4 dragon. I don't know exactly the timings, but she can probably do like a level 4 dragon. She's also AP in the jungle, and that's huge. Anytime you can play an AP champion right now, in top, mid, or jungle, I think it's pretty good to have one of those in your pool of champions, because there are so many AD champions running around. Most of the top champions that people pick are going to be AD in the jungle right now. You know, Master Yi is super popular, Volley. I guess you do have Ekko getting played, so Ekko and Elise are kind of the two most popular ones. Zac is sort of sometimes picked, but a lot of the popular AD champions, or a lot of the popular junglers, are still going to be AD. And then top lane is still going to be ruled by AD champions. We'll talk about those here in a second. And then even mid lane, even though the ones that I'm recommending that I say are good, almost all of them are AP with the exception of Qiyana, you're still going to see the Talons, you're still going to see the Zeds, you're still going to see a lot of AD stuff coming out of there. And you don't want your team to have too many ADs. Ideally, when you're thinking about top, mid lane, and jungle, 2 of those should be AP, because you know your AD carry most of the time is going to be AD, and it's really nice if you can have a 2-person split in terms of itemization. That makes it a lot more difficult for the enemies to itemize against you defensively. Because if you run all AD, even if the enemy team doesn't have a lot of tanks, if they just all take Ninja Tabby, it's still going to be like extremely powerful against your team. So being able to have that AP champion in your back pocket is nice. So she's going to be one of the best champions at doing that. So takes dragons, she does AP, she does an extreme amount of burst damage. If you're the first person in the bush, especially, and you hit that webbing on them and just roll your hand across the keyboard and just hit them with all the spells, they're going to die. So really, really good at getting the jump on people. And she's awesome at tower diving, and that's what makes her good at Pro and Challenger early on, and you're not going to be able to utilize that as much in lower elo brackets because your team just won't set that up properly most of the time. But she can go in, catch the tower aggro, take a tower shot, throw her rotation of damage, and then she can repel and get out and cancel a tower shot if she does it correctly. So that makes her really, really nice. And she scales, like, she can do something late game in team fights, right? She can still hit her webbing on somebody, and sometimes that's enough. If you just have a long-range web, you hit it, your team engages. Sometimes that can be enough, even if you can't do a lot else. And I think that's what separates her from a lot of other champions that tend to get outscaled that are good early game champs like Lee Sin and Zen, is that they have a much, much harder time contributing to fights because they're almost entirely melee. They can't do anything long range, whereas Elise at least has that cocoon in the late game that can contribute some to the fights. So I still think Elise is going to be really good. Has that cheap itemization as well. You know, she can get Runic Echoes, which is undercosted and very, very powerful. And she has a couple of other itemization choices out there, but Does a ton of damage. If you're looking for early aggression, I think she's going to be one of the best in the business. Then you have Nunu, who has fallen a little bit. He was number 1 for a while up there, but he's still going to be super strong. Excellent tank, very safe jungler, stays healthy for an entire clear. Obviously going to be very good at dragons and barons. You always have that steal option too, so even if your team is super far behind and the enemy team doesn't zone you away from that baron, if you flash in there as Nunu and you Q smite, you're going to be able to steal that baron. So a lot of people won't respect that. So that right there is going to make him really valuable in the Clown Fiesta known as solo queue. But he's just great. I mean, he ganks really well, too, for a tank in the early game. Most tanks don't gank that well. Zac does. But he ganks really well because he can run right through the lane with that snowball. And even after he lands that snowball, he has an additional piece of CC with his E, which applies a slow and then can also apply a root on top of that. So he's got a ton of CC. He can actually get some utility items, too, if he needs to. He can get things like a Knight's Vow. He can even get something like a Zeke's if your support's not getting a Zeke's. If your support's like a Janna or something like that, you can get a Zeke's to help out your AD carry. So you do have some different options. Most of the time, you're just going to be going like Cinderhulk and a Dead Man's Plate into like Spirit Visage. But if you do want to get some of those utility items, you can. Maybe it's like a 4th item. You could even get a Locket or something if your team's like having a lot of team fights and they have a lot of AoE damage. And that could be useful. So he does have some flexible itemization, but it's mostly just a super safe clear. Tons of CC, great ganking early, awesome objective control on those dragons and barons. So I think that's going to make him really vulnerable. He's also pretty easy to play, which is nice. He's always my go-to if I have to get auto-filled in the jungle. And then Vi, I think, is the other one that I wanted to mention here. Excellent point-click, hard engage, really safe clear, takes dragons extremely fast with her denting blows. So she's definitely a level 4 dragon threat. And then she can change over into tank as well, and she can be a reasonable tank. You know, after she gets her warrior into Trinity Force, she can start buying a bunch of tank items, and that allows her to just be a solid engaged champion. So she may not be able to one-shot people with that build later on, but you can still press R on the backline enemy AD carry and just stick to them and just absorb a lot of pressure. So I think that makes her really, really useful, even if your team's behind or even if the game goes late. She's still not going to be the best late-game jungler, you know, possible, but it's going to be pretty good, especially since they buffed her shield. I think that was at some point last season they buffed her shield, and her denting blows, I think, applies it for your whole team. I haven't played Vi in a really long time, but bonus attack speed, and the target has 20% reduced armor, yes. So it does shred the armor for your entire team if they want to do that extra damage, which is really nice. So I think that's going to make her really solid. And then a pretty low cooldown ult that you can just kind of spam and just run around and one-shot people. Now, they did buff her on this patch to where they can't knock you away while you're pulling someone in the air, which can be relevant, especially with something like a Janna or whatever. Janna can't peel people off of you as much anymore, so that can be really relevant, that the fact that she's going to stick to somebody and can't be peeled until she completes her entire combo. Because once again, before this change, when you pulled someone up in the air, you could peel the Vi off of you, but you can't do that anymore. So she's unstoppable for the entire uppercut. So that basically gives you an extra half a second of like hard CC, which is really nice, especially against Janna, like I said. But there are probably some other cases too. Now, so just really good clear. Like I said, good utility later on. She has a self-shield. She has good engage. She has the armor shred on everybody. So I think she's going to be solid. But then another champion that I didn't mention here that I think can be really good as well is Jarvan. And it's very similar to Vi in that he has a level 6 hard engage. He has the armor shred. He hands out the extra attack speed to everybody. I just put Jarvan a little bit lower because I don't think his clears as fast. I might be wrong about that. Correct me in the chat if you know better. But I know his dragons are definitely not as fast. And so that's the main reason that I put Vi here instead, is because she not only has good clear, good engage, sort of tanky later on in the game, tank-ish, but that she also takes the dragon super fast, even by herself. So I think that's something that pulls her up a little bit more in my mind than Jarvan. But if you're starting to get up into like low diamond, like high platinum, low diamond, and beyond, then I think Jarvan's going to be a little bit better. It's because he brings a bit more to the table and he's a bit more flexible. Although I don't think Jarvan was really played a ton. He was played some. He did have a nice win rate, but he only had 20% presence. But, you know, I did a one-trick video recently where I said Jarvan was one of the best one-trick junglers, and I still think that's true. I just think that, like, right now he's getting outshined a little bit just because he doesn't have as much dragon pressure in the early game. What else? Warwick might be another conspicuous absence. He does have a high win rate. I don't know. Maybe I just personally don't like Warwick that much, but I just feel like Tiamat is so awkward that you have to build that item on him. It just slows down the rest of your build so much when, like, all of these other junglers that I just mentioned don't need extra, like, to spend 1,400 gold on a wave clear item. Like, they just naturally have really good wave clear. So it just feels kind of awkward to me. Shaco, if you're a really good Shaco, he's always flexible, always strong, but I don't recommend him for everybody. He's more of a one-trick type of champ than someone who's just kind of browsing, you know, trying to find something fun to play. Volibear's really disrespected, really undervalued a lot, especially at gold and lower. He's just really consistent, does a ton of damage in team fights. He's very tanky. His ganks are okay if you can get around the wards. And he has a lot of anti-mobility things, which can be very good in certain matchups. If you do that Majestic Roar when someone's jumping, then it can be really nice. So that can be pretty good. It's annoying against Rakan. If they're quick with it, it's very good against things like Zac. Really anything that has a dash is trying to escape. Tristana's trying to jump away or whatever. You can roar and knock her out of the sky. So there are a lot of different uses of that. So it seems like he's like a no skill, just run at him, you know, bruiser type of champ. But there's actually quite a bit, not a ton, but there's some with the timing of that Majestic Roar to stop movement. So I think that he's really undervalued. He could be pretty solid as well. Zac, if you're really good with him, is really awesome, especially if you have a Soraka on your team and you get a Spirit Visage. It's just an insane amount of healing. He has great engage, so Zac can definitely be pretty solid as well. And then Olaf has kind of fallen out of favor quite a bit. I'm not entirely sure, I'll be honest with you. I don't know exactly what happened there because he was number 1 on my last tier list. You know, a lot of the junglers that I was watching that were making content, they were saying he was, like, super good. But he had pretty much no presence at Kespa, I don't think. Now, Kespa's a small sample size. That's all Koreans, and it's just one tournament. But, like, at 21% win rate, I mean, he was played 43% of the time. Just something about him. He's just getting blasted. So, he is very risky if you do fall behind. It can be pretty rough. But if you're very proficient on Olaf, I could still definitely see him being strong. Kha'Zix, if you're good on Kha'Zix, you know, he can always be really solid. So, there are quite a few junglers that are pretty good right now. I would say, despite all the complaining that everybody has always about balance in League of Legends, this is one of the most balanced states the game has been in a long time, because all of these roles, for the most part, have a pretty decent diversity of champions. You still aren't seeing, like, a ton of tanks everywhere, but there are definitely some tanks that are viable in the jungle. Nunu, Vi is tankish. We just talked about Volley and stuff like that. Mid lane even, you might be able to sneak a couple of tanks in there, but the fact that tanks are viable, again, at least a little bit in the jungle and the top, I think is really nice. And they're obviously, tanks are the most popular thing in support role right now. And then assassins are still good, and kind of your ranged mid-game type of champs are good too. Okay, speaking of which, let's go ahead and talk about top lane real quick, and then that'll be it. So, video is a little bit longer than I anticipated, but we are trying to cover 25 different champions with a decent amount of depth, so guess you're just going to get a longer video. Alright, Mordekaiser, he did get nerfed on this patch. I don't think it's going to matter that much. I watched Freak's patch notes. I pretty much disagreed with almost everything he said there, which is rare. I thought he was just trying to be very contrarian. I don't know. But Mordekaiser's still going to be really good, I think. Yes, they did nerf like his stickiness on people a little bit. And he has fallen down some. He was like 53%. But the champion still is just gross. He just has so much wave clear. He's impossible to gank because he can just ult one of the people that are there and force a 1v1 anytime he wants. Yes, people can buy a Quicksilver Sash to get out of it, but a lot of people just aren't going to do that. And if they have to do that, they're probably behind in terms of damage, and he's just going to kill them anyways, if that's the case. So, and his grab is pretty decent if you land it. But the big thing is he's just so hard to kill. He puts up so much damage, and he's so tanky. Especially if you have other people on your team that can hold people still, then he just puts out a ton of damage. So he's basically just like a magic damage version of Darius, I think to an extent that has a really good utility ultimate as well. That ult can be used to peel also. You know, if you've got an assassin, you've got like an Akali that's just running straight at your AD carry, you can just ult him as Mordekaiser and force that 1v1. That's someone else that I meant to mention for like mid lane, I think, or possibly top lane. I could mention her now as a Kali. If you're a god on a Kali, I think she can still be really good. She was obviously like permabanned at the recent Kespa Cup, so she's still very, very strong. I have seen some really good Akalis, but you have to be extremely good on her. So if you're a god on a Kali, you can definitely still make her work mid or top lane. She's going to be a good flex pick. Yeah, Mordekaiser, still going to be strong. Great because he's an AP option top as well. There are not many like really solid AP options for top lane. There are a few, but I think he's definitely going to be one of the more conspicuous ones out there. Okay, Darius, the physical damage version of Mordekaiser for the most part, just applies a ton of pressure in the lane, gets those ult resets in team fights, especially if you take Ghost with him. He's so hard to get away from. It's so hard to fight him in just a clean, straight fight because he does so much damage. So, I think that Darius is still going to be very, very strong. He can fall off later on. If you don't get a head on him, he can get kited and blown up or peeled. But if they don't peel you properly, or if you have a support on your team that's buying a Shirelias, you got your Janna or a Soraka that's buying a Shirelias for you, you're going to be able to murder some people in team fights. So, I still think that Darius is going to be pretty good. Don't need to say a lot about him. I think most people know how he works. Trinity Force is still going to be the go-to item most of the time. You can do Cleaver if you think the fights are going to be really long and if they have a lot of tanks, but I think a lot of times you still want to go for that Trinity Force build. Kled is another one that has been creeping up a lot. He is showing up on some tier lists out there, but he's just kind of a goofy champion. A lot of people aren't really sure like how his mechanic works, and so they'll get baited into an all-in, and then he'll get his mount back at the last second, and he'll kill him. So it's kind of a strange champ, but he does have a decent little gap closer with his E. He obviously has his ult to help gap close as well. And he just does like a crazy amount of damage, especially when you get Titanic Hydra. It is shocking how much damage that W, I think it's his W, does. Because when you combine like the Titanic burst that you get off of that with like, I think it's the third hit off of his W, then it'll just all of a sudden like out of nowhere do like 900 damage to you. And I don't know, it's just very confusing for a lot of people. And I've actually had to go back and watch replays in slow motion. I'm like, how did he possibly one-shot this person? But that's how he does it. It's stacking up. I think it's his W on the third or fourth hit or whatever's going to trigger that damage. Why can I not? I need to have my daughter help me with the alphabet here. Okay, here we go. Yeah, this thing. 150 bonus attack speed on his fourth basic attacks within 4 seconds, with the final attack dealing this. So if you trigger this together with the Titanic Hydra hit, then it just does this massive amount, and it doesn't even have to be the same target. So that's the thing, is like sometimes he goes on one person, and I've seen it to where he's like hitting a tank with this, and then out of nowhere on that last hit, he'll go in, auto attack, get that reset, like he'll flash on a squishy, auto attack, get the reset off of his final hit, and it'll just like almost one-shot him. Just like an insane amount of damage that he throws out there. It looks kind of unassuming how much damage it does, but it's that last hit that does, you know, the extra amount of the target's health, which just really blasts people. So he does a shocking amount of damage, has great team utility with his charge. He can definitely get you in there, especially if you have someone else on your team that can CC or operate as a tank. That's really good. So if you have a Vi jungle, or you've got like a Nautilus or a Leona that can go in there and start the fight, that can be really, really handy. So just kind of a sneaky champion, does a ton of damage, has some weird mechanics that people aren't used to, some really shocking burst that can come out of his W. The bear trap on a rope also has a 60% grievous wounds, which is really nice against like a Soraka or a Mundo or Zac or any of those other big healing champs. So he's weird. You got to practice him a little bit, but I think he can be strong right now. Ornn, I think, is one of the best kind of pure tanks in the top lane. The game's just slowed down a little bit, and like once he starts getting these free items, each one of these item upgrades is worth about 1,000 gold, and so, you know, it's every time you level up, you're giving 1,000 gold to your allies. So once you get everyone handed out these items, or even like 3 people get these items, then that's going to be 3,000 gold. So he upgrades himself first twice. I think it's when he hits level 13. Level 12 he gets this. So it's like he gets 2,000 free gold. So and these are like decent items that he can get. So he can get things. Usually it's Frozen Fist plus Infernal Mask, but it could also be Forge Fire Cape plus Frozen Fist if they have double AD. So you do not want to stack AD against an Ornn, because if he can get Forge Fire and Frozen Fist, he's just going to be almost impossible to kill with those upgrades. So just does a lot of utility in fights. He can knock people up with Volcanic Rupture. He's got the Bellows Breath, which does percentage health. He has the Brittle, which does percentage health. He has his ult, obviously. Has a knock-up, a lot of utility to it. So he can do quite a surprising amount of damage, and he just gives out just a lot of free gold. And it's just becoming harder and harder to pressure him. So I'm not entirely, like, 100% sure, like, what's brought him to the forefront, other than the fact that the game has slowed down a little bit and people are kind of figuring out what to do with him. I think the nerf to Conquer helps him out a ton now that people don't do true damage. It's like, yeah, they still get AD, but because he can stack up so much armor now with that double upgrade, that's going to make him a lot stronger in a lot of matchups. So yeah, it's a lot of people go for that Sunfire early on. And I don't know how he's doing in kind of the pro scene. Not bad at 52%. So yeah, I think that Ornn is going to be a pretty big pickup. You got to learn how to play him a bit. A lot of people get this too, this little Bramble Vest. I see that in a lot of matchups top lane, where you have a tank-ish type of champion that'll get this. So like sometimes even Darius will get it against auto attackers. It seems to be really, really effective, even if you never upgrade it. So I think Ornn's going to be solid with that. And then Shen is the final one that I'll talk about, and we'll make sure we get out of here before this is too long. The Shen's the last one that I think has been climbing up quite a bit, certainly in terms of win rate. He's moving up a bit. He's at 52.7. But he has a lot of utility in his kit. Obviously, he has his ult, but then he also has the auto attack block off of his, whatever it's called, his E, his Spirit Refuge or something, I think. And then he does pretty good later on. It just, against like super hardcore splitters, it's going to be difficult to beat him, or for Shen to beat them. But against a lot of kind of your mid-tier split champions, once he gets a couple of items, he can put out some pretty decent damage, and he's really, really hard to kill, especially melee on melee, because he's going to block so many of those damage items. Now, I'm curious if people ever started getting, like, Trinity Force on him. I think a lot of people do Titanic Hydra as their one sort of offensive item that you'll get on him. I could have sworn that I saw a couple of Shens doing, like, Trinity Force builds, although that might have just been sort of troll. I've seen an Ornn Trinity Force build, too. We actually had, I forgot his name, the really famous GP guy, mid lane, that, like, rages a lot. I can't remember his name. But anyways, he was in one of my games on a Smurf, and he was playing, like, GP with a, with a Trinity Force. Looks like pros aren't doing quite as hot on him, and, like, nobody's getting Trinity Force, so yeah, it looks like it's just the Tiamat into Titanic Hydra for better wave clear. There's a couple of people getting Trinity. But he just has great utility, great pressure around the map, especially if you have someone else that has hard engage. If you're trying to split, but you have like a Nautilus or a Vi or something that can force fights elsewhere on the map, then you can port in with your ult. And that can be really handy. Especially if you put him up against somebody that can't easily interrupt his ult, then that can be really handy. So against someone like a Kled can't really easily interrupt his ult. I mean, Kled can like do the bear trap on a rope and yank you out of it. But he's got to really be paying attention to get that on time. So I think he's nice, provides a lot of extra pressure, decent split pusher. There could be a couple of other ones top lane that are alright too. Malphite's almost always going to be solid if you're auto-filled. He's just one of the best team fight tanks out there. You just press R, do a ton of damage. So Malphite's still going to be really strong. Yorick is really good, particularly at gold and lower. People don't understand what he does, kind of like Kled. And those ghouls just will stack up a ton of damage while you're split pushing. They won't respect your split push. Singe is another one who's kind of like a one-trick type of champ, but particularly at gold and lower, where people aren't going to be paying attention to how much damage his smoke is doing. That can be really strong, so I think Singe can be solid. You might be able to play Diana top. I think she's a bit weaker up there. She can work. Cassiopeia in certain matchups can be a decent top laner. Jax can be really OP if he gets through the laning phase. So there's still quite a few top laners that are pretty good. Rumble can be flex top. Heimerdinger can go mid or top and be decent. The Camille and the Fiora, some other tier lists, you know, will say that they're really strong. They're okay. They don't have a lot of utility that they bring to the kit, but they are very, very good at split pushing. Camille can roam pretty well and lock people down with her ult, so Camille does have that going for her. But neither one of them is that great in a team fight, and I just feel like the meta right now, a lot of it is team fighting, especially in the early to mid game around Rift Heralds and Dragons and things like that, and they just don't bring a lot to the table for that. But if your team really needs a split pusher to match one of their split pushers, then those two can be really good. Okay, but anyways, that's going to be it. Ryze is another one who could be pretty good, also out of the top lane, or Akali. But that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed this. If you did, be sure to like and subscribe. Come check out the streams, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Most nights usually goes till about 2 or 3 a.m. We'd love to have you. I'm going to be doing my placement games tonight. We'll see if we get them all done. I don't remember if it's 5 or 10. If it's 10, we probably won't be able to do it all in one sitting. But we'll get as many as we can done. And we'll definitely have them all done over the next couple of days. So be sure to check that out. I'll be bringing you some more content as well. I know there's some more champion guides that I'm going to be bringing out. And I might even bring out some more topical guides as well. Like maybe more in-depth about how to vision or wave control. Just update some of these old guides I had. Dodging, how to understand dodging, when you should or shouldn't dodge. So stay tuned for that. Be sure to like and subscribe to get those notifications. And I'll see you next time. Have a great day.